Get out of my lobby. This isn't a place for pop stars in disguise. The words weren't a slip, they landed like policy. Loud, certain, rehearsed. Jeremy Clarkson, celebrity figurehead and brand ambassador of the Belgravia Royale Hotel in central London, stood behind the front desk with his arms crossed and disdain dripping from every wrinkle in his smug expression. He didn't whisper. He didn't conceal it. He wanted the whole lobby to hear. He looked straight at the young man in a plain hoodie and sneakers, Jungkook, and decided, then and there, that he didn't belong. What Clarkson didn't know was that, in exactly 9 minutes, the man standing quietly in front of him would strip him, and every member of his team, of their authority. In the very lobby where he had just tried to humiliate him. Before we unravel that moment, let's rewind. Jungkook walked through the revolving glass doors of the Belgravia Royale alone. No bodyguard, no luxury watch, no assistant trailing him, just a black hoodie, well-fitted jeans, and the calm presence of someone who had seen this scene before. He moved quietly across the marble floor, his steps nearly soundless, but his presence sent ripples through the air. He approached the front desk. Behind it stood Jeremy Clarkson, 60, flanked by 2 staffers, Lauren Hayes, 30, polished but cold, and Kevin Patel, 27, already narrowing his eyes like a security cam in human form. No one smiled. No one greeted him. They just scanned him like a problem that had somehow made it past the front doors. Reservation under John, Jungkook said plainly. Penthouse suite. Clarkson squinted. You sure you're at the right hotel, mate? That's our top-tier booking. Jungkook didn't answer the insult. He calmly slid his passport and a matte black credit card across the counter. Clarkson picked it up with 2 fingers like it might be counterfeit or contagious. Suspicious, he muttered. Looks fake. Without hesitation, Lauren pressed a button under the desk. Her voice pierced the silence through the intercom. Security to front desk. Possible unauthorized guest attempting access to a VIP suite. Likely fraudulent. Jungkook didn't even blink. I'm not here for trouble. I'm here for my room. Kevin scoffed. People try this all the time. Fancy card. Made up name. Hoping we won't double-check. Across the lounge, Sophie Lin, a travel blogger from San Francisco, whispered to her friend Jacob Reed. I'm recording this. Then louder. We're at the Belgravia Royale in London, and something disgusting is happening right now. Jacob hit go live. This is going viral. At the far end, junior concierge Emma Ruiz looked up from her desk. Her eyes met Jungkook's. There was something unspoken in that glance, recognition, concern, or both. She took a step forward, but Clarkson stopped her with a glare. He doesn't belong here, he snapped. Jungkook didn't argue. He just took out his phone and tapped the screen once. 3 blocks away, his assistant in the London corporate office, Mina Choi, answered instantly. It's happening, he said. Systems ready, she replied. Clarkson was now twirling Jungkook's black card like he expected it to confess something. We've seen this scam before, he said louder, facing the lobby. They flash high-limit cards, vanish when we verify them. Not today. He handed the card to Kevin. Lock it up. Kevin eagerly took it, placed it inside a brushed steel drawer, and slammed the safe shut like he'd won a prize. You're done here, Kevin said smugly. They just stole his card, Sophie exclaimed. That's theft, Jacob added. That's not hotel policy. Jungkook stayed still, calm, steady. You're going to regret this, he said quietly. Because years ago, Jungkook had landed in London after a delayed flight, walked into a boutique hotel in Soho in sweats, and was told he didn't look like someone who stayed there. That night, he'd slept in a car rental. And the next morning, he drafted the early vision of a global hospitality group, one he would one day own in part. Now, in the lobby of one of those very hotels, a man like Clarkson was trying to erase him all over again. Clarkson leaned in. Your reservation's been cancelled. We don't entertain pretenders. You're blocking actual guests. Jungkook nodded toward Sophie and Jacob. You mean the ones filming all this? All eyes were on them now. Guests were watching, whispering, discomfort spreading like smoke. Lauren stepped forward. You need to leave now. Jungkook held her gaze. Are you sure? Positive. Or we'll call the police. Clarkson smirked. Go on, make a scene. It won't end well for you. Jungkook's voice remained calm. That's the last time you speak to me like that. Emma finally stepped up. He's right, she said. His name's in the system. John. Penthouse suite. Checked in remotely. Clarkson spun toward her. One more word and you're gone too. Jungkook lifted his phone again. This time louder. Mina, log this moment. Timestamp the video feed. Logged, Mina responded. Systems armed. Jacob pointed to the safe. It says John VIP tier. It's real. He's real. Clarkson scoffed again. Anyone can make a fake card. Especially people like. Finish that sentence, Jungkook interrupted. Clarkson couldn't. The words curled up and died in his throat as he realized the crowd was no longer just watching. They were listening, judging. Jungkook took a slow step forward, the stillness in him more powerful than any outburst. You've just made the worst mistake of your professional life. Clarkson gave a dry chuckle, still pretending to be in control. You think so? Jungkook's eyes didn't waver. No. I know so. No. I know. And as the tension gripped the lobby like a tightening noose, no one, not Jeremy Clarkson, not Lauren, not Kevin, had the slightest idea who the man standing calmly in front of them truly was. But they were about to find out. Kevin, puffed up with false confidence, lifted the small silver key like it was a trophy. This card is now company property, he declared, loud and proud. And until the bank verifies it, you're not getting it back. He grinned, smug and performative, as the safe door behind him clicked shut with icy finality. What Kevin didn't realize was that the storm had already begun, and he had just made himself the center of it. Jungkook didn't react. He didn't need to. His stillness was louder than any outburst, more authoritative than any title. Jeremy, growing uneasy at the silent crowd forming around them, leaned in again. You're wasting everyone's time, he said. Walk out now, or we'll make that choice for you. That's when Lauren, emboldened by Jeremy's arrogance and Kevin's showmanship, stepped from behind the desk, straightened her blazer, and reached out to touch Jungkook's arm. You've been warned. It's time for you to leave. The moment her hand made contact, the lobby atmosphere cracked wide open. Gasps erupted. Sophie Lynn's phone caught the exact second it happened, her voice rising above the chaos. She just grabbed him. She was already uploading it to Reddit, with the caption, "This is happening. Belgravia Royale. Live." Jacob's live stream surged past 100 viewers, then 500, as the comments poured in. Emma Ruiz, standing by the concierge desk, stepped forward, her voice trembling with quiet fury. You can't put your hands on a guest, she said sharply. His reservation is valid. Lauren spun toward her, fire in her eyes. You stay out of this if you want to keep your job. But Emma didn't back down. She looked Jungkook in the eye, who still hadn't moved, and said, I won't lie for you, loud enough for Jeremy to hear. That was the moment Jeremy dropped the corporate mask. He's trying to scam us, he hissed. People like him always think they can play the system. His voice dropped, but the venom was unmistakable, and it reached the ears of several nearby guests. One gray-haired woman lifted her phone higher, whispering, I can't believe what I'm hearing. A man in a navy suit leaned toward Jacob's phone and asked, You getting all this? Jacob didn't even blink. All of it. In the center of the storm, Jungkook remained perfectly composed. He brought his phone to his ear again. Mina, he said calmly, escalate the internal system. Begin audit documentation. I want every word logged from this moment forward. Mina's voice came through clear and steady. Understood. Timestamped and recorded. Do you want Carla on standby? Jungkook replied, Give me 1 more minute. Just as he spoke, Kevin leaned in over the desk and shouted loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. You're a fraud, mate. You think a fancy card gets you a penthouse? Go back to wherever you came from. The murmurs turned to a collective gasp. Emma, now standing shoulder to shoulder with Jungkook, raised her voice with steel in her tone. I've worked here for 3 years. I've seen this pattern before. Anytime someone walks in alone, dressed down, confident, you treat them like they're here to steal something. Jeremy's eyes narrowed to slits, but Emma didn't stop. And every time someone questions it, you call it policy. But it's not policy, it's you. Somewhere deep in Jungkook's memory, another lobby surfaced. He had been 16, waiting in a hotel in Paris, wearing his Sunday best. A staff member told him the area was for guests only and escorted him to the sidewalk. He never forgot that shame. It didn't make him bitter. It made him focused. Jeremy snapped. Enough. I want him out now. Security will remove both of you if they have to. Lauren, who had gone quiet since Sophie began filming again, jumped in. He refused to provide valid ID. That's a breach. I'm reporting it. But the damage was done. The guests weren't whispering anymore. They were recording, nodding, reacting. Jacob turned the camera to his face. To be crystal clear, we are watching a guest be harassed by hotel staff after providing his name, card, and ID. Now they're trying to physically remove him. This isn't customer service. This is discrimination. Jungkook turned to Kevin, his voice unchanged. Return my card. Now. Kevin leaned over the counter, sneering. Or what? Jungkook didn't blink. Or you'll be locked out of Belgravia's global system for life. No employment. No references. No appeal. Lauren scoffed. You don't speak for Belgravia. But Emma replied instantly. He does. Jeremy's voice cracked like a whip. You're out of line. Emma, you don't even know who he is. Sophie's voice cut through from the side. Oh, she does. We all do. She turned the camera toward Jungkook. Look at how he's standing. Calm. Silent. That's not someone begging to stay. That's someone watching you dig your own grave. Jungkook's tone never shifted. Kevin, one last chance. For the first time, Kevin looked unsure. Jeremy scrambled to justify himself. This isn't personal. It's about protocol. But his words arrived too late. Sophie and Jacob's videos were already trending. Guests were no longer just watching, they were choosing sides. One man said aloud, I've stayed here for years. Not anymore. A young woman with a suitcase turned to Emma. Is he really who I think he is? Emma didn't answer, but the silence did. Then Emma stepped forward, her voice firmer than ever. This isn't the first time Jeremy ignored complaints like this. He's been warned. I logged 3 incidents last month. 2 of them were solo women of color. All of them were dismissed. Jeremy Clarkson's face turned crimson. That's a lie, he snapped. Jacob swung his camera toward him. You sure? Jungkook slowly turned his gaze around the lobby. Every single phone was raised now. Every guest had stopped pretending to mind their own business. They weren't just watching anymore. They were witnessing. He didn't direct his words to anyone in particular, but his voice rang through the space with quiet authority. Your time running this place unchecked is over. Jeremy's mouth opened again, reaching for control that was long gone. Fine, he barked. If you won't leave, I'll call the police myself. Jungkook smiled. Please do. And for the first time since this all began, Jeremy hesitated. Because what he saw in Jungkook's face wasn't fear. It wasn't uncertainty. It was power, controlled, still, and completely out of Jeremy's reach. The crowd began to shift, not with panic, but with purpose. Guests moved, subtly but deliberately, forming a quiet barricade between Jungkook and the front desk. One woman rolled her suitcase directly into Lauren's path. A man unplugged his phone from the wall and walked to stand next to Emma. Jacob turned his phone to the growing assembly. They're protecting him now, he said to his audience. Jungkook, still perfectly centered in the lobby, took one step forward. This lobby belongs to me. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Kevin's smug grin disappeared. Lauren looked at the floor. Jeremy blinked, and in that silence, so sharp it seemed to hum, the entire mood of the space shifted. The hostility cracked. The weight of every assumption began to crumble. How would you respond if someone tried to push you out of a hotel you owned? Throw him out now. Jeremy's voice cracked, like a gavel slamming too hard. Desperate. Out of sync with the moment. He's trespassing. He's a liar. He slammed his hand onto the desk intercom. Kevin's voice echoed through the entire lobby moments later. To all staff, unauthorized individual in the lobby, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage with this guest. Fraud alert. And then silence. Thick, suffocating. Jungkook didn't move, but the guests did. From the corner, Sophie Lin's voice rose with fire. He's not a fraud. We're recording everything. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with rage. Jacob's stream surged past 2,000 viewers. The comments flooded in. That's theft. Unreal. How is this happening in a 5-star hotel? A mother-in-line whispered to her teenage daughter, they're going to regret this. But Lauren, still trying to follow Jeremy's collapsing lead, grabbed Jungkook's arm again and yanked. "Let's go," she hissed through clenched teeth. "You're embarrassing yourself." That was when Emma stepped between them. The youngest staff member in the room, still the only one consistently speaking truth, stood firm, shoulder to shoulder with Jungkook. "Don't touch him again," she said, loud and clear. Lauren froze. "You'll be fired." Emma didn't budge. "Then fire me," she snapped. "But you're not putting your hands on him." Jeremy surged forward, voice rising in fury. "Do you even know who he is?" he barked at her. "He's a fraud. Look at him." He waved his hand toward Jungkook's black hoodie, his sneakers, his simple jeans, like clothing proved anything. "People who stay in penthouse suites don't look like that." Jungkook's voice was low, but sharp. "You keep saying that word, fraud. Like if you say it enough, it'll erase what you've done." He took another slow step forward, closing the space between them like a noose tightening around Jeremy's story. He remembered being 29, landing in LA for a global music summit, wearing a navy pantsuit, clean, sharp, professional. And still, the front desk clerk had squinted at his ID and said, "This can't be you," then demanded another form, and another. Meanwhile, 3 white men had walked past and checked into penthouse suites without even showing ID. That night, he wrote the first draft of Belgravia's zero-tolerance guest profiling policy. It lived in his bones, and now so did this moment. "Call security," Jeremy barked to Kevin, who stood a few steps away from the desk, now visibly uneasy. "Do it now." But Kevin didn't move. The confidence was gone from his eyes, because he no longer saw a man faking his way into luxury. He saw someone who knew things, someone who didn't need to raise his voice to take everything away. And guests were watching. Sophie's phone swept across faces, catching every blink of guilt, every twitch of fear. Jacob turned to a man nearby and asked, "Sir, what do you see happening here?" The man didn't hesitate. "I see someone getting thrown out of a hotel he clearly belongs in." Jeremy spun toward him. "That's slander. He hasn't proven anything." Jungkook lifted his phone. "Would anyone like proof?" Jacob responded instantly, "Show them." But Jungkook didn't flash a badge. He didn't pull out a contract. Instead, he turned to Emma. Calm, quiet. "Do you see my name in the reservation system?" Emma nodded. "Yes, it's under John. Penthouse, checked in remotely." "And is there a VIP tag?" She nodded again. "Yes, marked as executive level override. Owner level clearance." The lobby fell utterly silent. Jeremy Clarkson's eyes darted left and right, hunting for an exit. Any exit. "That could have been faked," he stammered. "He could have hacked the system." Sophie snapped from across the room. "You really think someone just walked in off the street, hacked your hotel system, and brought 2,000 witnesses with him?" Lauren, suddenly pale, lowered her gaze to the polished marble floor. Kevin stepped forward, visibly shaken. "I locked the card in the safe under your instruction, Jeremy," he said. What if we're wrong?" Jungkook turned to face him. His voice was cool, but it hit like a blade. "You were told to steal from me. That's what you did. But you had a choice." Kevin opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no defense. Then, something unexpected happened. The crowd moved. An older woman with a white bob and a floral scarf stepped between Jungkook and Lauren. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You're not laying a hand on him again." Another guest joined her. Then a woman with a stroller. Then a man in a suit. Within seconds, a loose half-circle of guests had formed around Jungkook, like a human boundary, drawn by conscience. Unspoken, absolute. Jeremy, standing behind the front desk, looked smaller than he had just minutes before. Jungkook scanned the faces of strangers who had chosen to stand for him without being asked. And he spoke softly. "This is what happens," he said, "when silence stops being an option." Jacob turned his phone to the crowd. "They're standing with him now," he said into the live stream. "And I don't think they're going anywhere." Jeremy's mask of control shattered completely. He shouted over the noise, "You're all being manipulated. He's playing you." And then Kevin, still holding the intercom mic, whispered something under his breath, almost too soft to hear. But the whole lobby heard it. It echoed through the speaker system like a secret escaping into the open. "He owns the place, doesn't he?" It hung in the air like smoke. Sophie slowly turned her camera back to Jungkook's face. "Do you?" she asked, breathless. Emma Ruiz stepped forward. He does. A wave of gasps rolled through the room. A man seated by the lounge whispered, "Wait, this is his hotel?" Lauren turned to Jeremy, horror creeping across her face. "You said he was lying." Jeremy didn't say a word. Jacob zoomed in, whispering to his audience. This is the moment everything changed. Jungkook stepped forward, past Emma, past the human wall of guests, and stopped just inches from Jeremy, who stood frozen like a man watching his empire slip away. "You wanted me out," Jungkook said, voice steady. "You framed me. You called me a thief. You tried to humiliate me in my own lobby." Jeremy's lips parted, but nothing came out. From Jungkook's phone, Mina's voice came through with precise calm. "Jungkook, Carla is ready. Do you want me to patch her through?" His eyes never left Jeremy's. "Yes, right now." He tapped the screen. Carla Bennett's voice filled the air, crisp and cold. "Jungkook, everything is prepared. We're standing by for your authorization." Jungkook drew a quiet breath. "Terminate Jeremy Clarkson. Terminate Lauren Hayes. Terminate Kevin Patel. Immediate removal from the Belgravia system. Freeze their access credentials. Log this incident for legal audit." A heartbeat passed. "Confirmed," Carla said. "Processing now." And then it happened. Jeremy's access badge buzzed red. So did Lauren's. So did Kevin's. Right there, in front of everyone, they were digitally erased. No shouting. No spectacle. Just justice. Swift. Irrevocable. In that moment, something became clear to every single person watching. This wasn't just a man defending himself. This was someone dismantling an entire power structure in 9 minutes flat. What would you have done if you had witnessed it? Let us know in the comments below. Jeremy Clarkson's last shred of composure shattered as his badge blinked and died in his hand. He stared at it like it had personally betrayed him. Kevin looked pale, stunned, as his badge displayed the same error. Lauren stood frozen, gripping the edge of the counter as if that alone might stop her world from falling apart. But the lobby had already changed. Where once there had been intimidation, now there was uprising. Quiet rebellion wrapped in phone cameras and accountability. Emma Ruiz, no longer the background concierge, stood tall beside Jungkook. Her jaw was set, her voice unwavering. "They've been removed," she said clearly to the entire room. "They don't speak for Belgravia anymore." Jeremy exploded. "This is illegal. You can't just... This isn't how hotels work. Call corporate." He turned to Lauren in panic. "Get someone on the line." But Lauren was already staring at her phone. Her hands trembled. I'm blocked," she whispered. "My login's gone. Everything's gone." Kevin, desperate, stepped toward the safe. "Maybe I can get the card back." "Stop right there," Emma cut in, raising a hand. "You're no longer authorized to handle guest property. Step away from the counter." Kevin stopped, then backed away. And Jeremy tried one final, flailing insult. "You really think this circus makes you a leader?" he snarled. "You tricked your way in. You humiliated us. You'll be sued for this." But his voice cracked, just a little, enough to reveal the truth. He was no longer in control, and he knew it. Jungkook tilted his head slightly, still calm, still steady. "You think leadership is about hiding things? About controlling perception?" He didn't need to finish the sentence. He didn't have to, because the room already understood who the real leader was. Jungkook turned to the guests around him and gestured, not dramatically, but with quiet conviction. "Leadership is when the people who've been ignored for too long finally speak, and they're heard." As if on cue, a woman near the back raised her voice. "You never took my complaint seriously last spring," she said. "I emailed about being harassed at check-in, and no one followed up. You were the one who replied and dismissed it." Jeremy turned sharply toward her, his eyes trying to place her face, then quickly looked away. Another voice rang out. "I was double-charged for a room and got no help until I threatened legal action. And then from the lounge chairs, I asked for an ADA-compliant room and was told none were available. Then I watched someone else check in and get one without asking." One by one, the stories spilled forward, not whispered anymore but declared, a chorus of past wrongs, a tide of withheld accountability finally rising. Emma Ruiz stepped forward once more, no longer tentative, now carrying the full weight of truth and momentum. I logged 3 separate complaints in the last 2 months about profiling at the front desk, she said. All dismissed, and every one of them was signed off by Jeremy. Lauren began backing up until her shoulder hit the wall, her eyes bouncing between the crowd and her collapsing team. Greg, what is this? She whispered. They're turning on us. Jeremy's voice had shrunk to a faint protest. They're just angry. This'll blow over. But it didn't. It grew. Jacob swept his live stream across the room. This is what a reckoning looks like, he said into his mic. They pushed too far. And now the guests are finally speaking. Then came the moment that sealed it all. Sophie pulled up her Reddit post, now viral. Hundreds of comments, dozens of reposts, screenshots of Kevin's intercom message. This card is now company property. A clip of Lauren grabbing Jungkook's arm. Another of Jeremy yelling, "People like him don't belong here." "It's out there now," Sophie said aloud. "Everyone's seeing it." Jeremy's desperation snapped once more. He lunged toward the front counter, voice raw. "Delete that. That's private property." But 2 guests stepped between him and the phones. One, a quiet man with reading glasses and a messenger bag, said firmly, "No, you don't get to silence this." The other, an elderly woman in a floral shawl, raised her phone. "Your face is already online. You might want to think twice before making another threat." That was the tipping point. Lauren turned to Jungkook, her voice trembling. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Jungkook didn't nod. He didn't offer comfort. "You helped make it happen," he said. "You watched it happen." And then Jeremy Clarkson did something no one expected. He turned to Jungkook, his voice frayed, his posture collapsed. "Why didn't you just tell us who you were?" he asked. "You set us up." Jungkook blinked. "No. I gave you every opportunity to treat me like any other guest. That was the test. And you failed it publicly." At that moment, Mina's voice came through Jungkook's phone, now on speaker. "Com. Official. Jungkook, the board has authorized a full incident response. Carla is ready for the next steps." Jungkook scanned the lobby once more. Phones still recording. I still locked on him. Every guest present, still bearing witness. "Patch her through." Carla Bennett's voice filled the air, composed and final. "Jeremy Clarkson, Lauren Hayes, Kevin Patel, effective immediately, your employment with Belgravia Hospitality Group is terminated. Your access has been revoked. Legal documentation is being prepared. Mr. John will oversee next steps directly. Guests, please be advised, new leadership will be addressing your concerns momentarily." The words landed like thunder. Kevin made one last effort. "This is insane," he muttered. "We built this place." Jungkook turned to him, steady as ever. "You built nothing. You guarded the door and turned away the very people we claimed to serve." Then he turned to Emma. "Please unlock the safe. Retrieve my card." Emma moved swiftly, professionally. She entered a new code, her code, and opened the safe. Inside, Jungkook's black card sat untouched. She lifted it carefully and handed it to him. No words, but her eyes were wet with emotion. And then the clapping began. Not loud, not performative, just firm, steady. A room full of strangers acknowledging something long overdue. Jungkook looked out across the lobby, not for applause, but for resolve. "This wasn't just about me," he said. "This was about every guest who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Every complaint that vanished. Every policy that punished instead of protected." Behind him, Jeremy, Lauren, and Kevin stood stripped of title, stripped of power, stripped of illusion. And still, the consequences had only begun. Jungkook turned back toward Mina's voice on the phone. "Proceed," he said. "Nia," Jungkook said, voice steady over the speakerphone. "We're proceeding with full lobby-level reform. Prepare the public statement and elevate Emma Ruiz's status. She'll be leading this location from now on." "Yes, sir," Nia replied immediately. And with that, Jungkook John stepped forward. No longer mistaken, no longer anonymous. He had just taken his hotel back, one quiet, decisive step at a time. He stood alone in the center of the marble lobby, calm and composed. Behind him, the 3 disgraced employees he had just dismissed stood frozen behind the desk, their faces pale, their reputations shattered, their power extinguished. Jeremy Clarkson's eyes, once filled with smug dominance, now darted between the stunned guests, the rows of live-streaming phones, and the man he had so confidently labeled a fraud just moments earlier. Kevin stared blankly at the now open safe, its only contents, the black card he had mocked, resting securely in Jungkook's hand. Lauren stood still, her lips parted, her eyes fixed on the floor. She no longer dared to meet anyone's gaze. The lobby held its breath. The silence wasn't tension anymore. It was anticipation. Everyone in the room sensed they were witnessing something lasting. Jungkook turned slowly to face them. He adjusted the hem of his plain black hoodie and stepped forward. Not for attention, not for spectacle, but with the kind of steady resolve that only comes from truth. "My name is Jungkook John," he said, his voice clear, unwavering. "I am the co-founder and global partner of Belgravia Hospitality Group. And as of this moment, I am reclaiming this hotel, not just from those who misused their roles, but from every excuse they ever hid behind." The words crashed through the lobby like a wave. Phones lowered slightly, eyebrows raised. A soft gasp came from somewhere near the elevator bank. Another guest whispered, "He owns it. He owns everything." Jacob's livestream exploded with real-time comments. "CEO, this just flipped everything. No way. This is legendary. What a move." Jeremy stumbled forward, almost begging. Wait, this isn't how we do things. You're the CEO? You should have. There's protocol. There are procedures. You ambushed us." Jungkook didn't flinch. "No," he said calmly. "I walked in like every other guest, quiet, alone, respectful. The only thing I didn't bring was privilege. And you showed me exactly how your team treats someone who doesn't look the part." Kevin shook his head in disbelief. "We didn't know. We couldn't have known." "You didn't need to know," Jungkook snapped, not angry, just factual. "That's the point." Emma Ruiz stepped beside him, her voice quiet but firm. "I recognized the name when he checked in. I saw the suite tag, the override clearance. I knew who he was, but I didn't say anything. Not right away." "I'm sorry." Jungkook turned to her and nodded. "You did more than anyone else in this lobby. You told the truth. You stood up. And now you'll be promoted guest services director. Effective immediately." Emma's eyes widened. Around her, the applause began again, slower this time, more grounded. Not for drama, for justice. A moment of quiet triumph settled across the lobby. Then Lauren spoke for the first time in what felt like hours. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. Her voice was trembling. I didn't know what to do." Jungkook looked at her for a long moment. "You had a choice," he said plainly. "You made it when you pressed that intercom, when you grabbed my arm, when you laughed, when you watched your colleague lock away my card like I didn't matter." Lauren's composure cracked. "It was Jeremy," she cried. "He told us how to handle people who didn't match our top-tier guest profile. He said we were protecting the brand." "It was Jeremy," Lauren finally said, her voice trembling. "He told us we were just protecting the brand image. I thought it was normal." Jeremy whipped his head around, furious. "That's a lie," he snapped. Jungkook raised a calm hand, stopping them both. "No, it's not a lie. It's a confession, and we'll document it." Carla's voice returned over speakerphone, steady and measured. "We've logged the admission, escalating to legal and compliance." A few guests nodded visibly. A woman holding a toddler spoke up from the back. "About time someone got held accountable." Jacob, still streaming live, looked into the lens and said, "He didn't just fire them. He exposed the whole system from the top down." Kevin stepped forward weakly. "What happens to us now?" he asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate. "You'll receive formal notice of termination. Your names will be flagged across Belgravia's hiring network. You are banned from future employment with any of our properties. And if we discover previous misconduct covered under your supervision, further action will follow." Jeremy stared at him like a man who had just realized he'd picked the wrong person to underestimate. "All this," he muttered, "because you wanted to prove a point?" Jungkook met his gaze coldly. "No. All this because I'm done letting people like you decide who deserves respect based on how they look or dress." From the crowd, Sophie raised her voice. "They tried to erase him. Now he's rewriting the rules." Jungkook turned toward Elena. "Reset the check-in system. Suspend all pending reservations tagged under Jeremy Clarkson's staff ID. Reach out to every affected guest and offer full compensation. Elena nodded without hesitation, finally standing in her new role with confidence. Then Jungkook turned to the guests. If any of you were mistreated at this property, today or before, our internal team is here in the lobby. Nia has opened a direct complaints line. You'll receive a response within 48 hours. No PR spin, no delays, just truth. The lobby didn't erupt, it shifted, from silent tension to murmurs of clarity. An elderly man in a gray cap tipped it slightly. Thank you, he said softly, for not walking away. Jungkook nodded. I've walked away too many times. Not anymore. Carla's voice returned again. Media outlets have picked up the stream. It's trending across platforms, but your voice remains in control. Jungkook gave a short nod. Let them talk. Let the world see what it looks like when a company doesn't just apologize but reforms. He turned back to Jeremy, Lauren, and Kevin. You're dismissed. Your belongings will be sent to you. You are not to speak to or approach any guest. Elena looked to him. Should I call security? No, Jungkook said. Let them walk through the lobby. Let every guest see the consequence of unchecked behavior. As the three walked through the marble lobby, stripped of authority and title, no one stopped them. No one offered sympathy. Only silence and the weight of public reckoning followed them out. Once the glass doors shut behind them, the energy in the room shifted again. From confrontation to transformation. Under chandeliers and gold-trimmed check-in counters, change had arrived, not in secret meetings, but live, in the heart of the hotel. Jungkook turned to Elena. Initiate the reform plan. Start from the top. Elena immediately shut down the old reservation system and disabled all accounts linked to the terminated employees. Done, she confirmed. Jungkook lifted his phone again. Nia, send the internal alert. Notify legal, diversity ops, compliance. I want a full audit of the last 18 months. Guest complaints, misconduct logs, internal memos, everything. Nia replied instantly. Already in motion. Your voice is the story now. Carla is preparing the official release. Guests began to approach Elena quietly. One woman with a printout of her reservation whispered, "Thank you. I was too scared to speak earlier." Elena smiled gently. "We're listening now." In the far corner, Jacob's livestream ticked past 10,000 viewers. His caption now read, CEO reclaims hotel, fires entire team, real-time reform. Sophie approached Jungkook, phone lowered. Do you want me to keep posting? He nodded. Only the truth. That's all I care about. He turned back to the crowd. For years, Belgravia promised inclusion. But policies mean nothing if bias is allowed to thrive behind the desk. Today, that changes. Jungkook looked toward Elena once more. Reassign all staff training to begin within 72 hours, he said firmly. We'll bring in an independent firm. Every employee, front desk, concierge, management will undergo recertification. No grandfather clauses. No excuses. As he spoke, Carla's voice returned over speaker. Full reform plan approved. Local media is requesting a statement. You are authorized to suspend operations as necessary for guest safety. Jungkook nodded. Then suspend front desk bookings temporarily. Elena will manually manage all VIP guests. The rest will be redirected to our downtown partner property with a complimentary night. He turned again to Elena. You okay with that? She didn't hesitate. More than okay, she replied. Around them, the atmosphere in the lobby had shifted once again. Guests no longer looked like bystanders. They had become part of it. One man offered to help with luggage. A couple began handing out water bottles to those waiting. Out of confrontation had grown cohesion. The lobby had transformed, part recovery room, part headquarters of change. And then came the twist that turned Jungkook's calm into something sharper. A notification pinged on his screen, an internal flag from compliance. He opened it without a word, scanned the summary, and his jaw set. Then he looked up and said to no one in particular, Jeremy didn't act alone. The lobby stilled. Carla's voice, now in his earpiece, dropped low. We pulled Horizon Grand's archived complaints. Jeremy submitted false summaries to regional HQ. Complaints marked resolved were never even investigated. And he was in direct contact with Michael Turner. Jungkook's voice went colder. Turner, the former regional director who retired 3 months ago with HR flags no one followed up on because he was just considered old school. Nia chimed in. Turns out he protected Jeremy. And Lauren. There's a pattern. Jungkook closed his eyes just for a moment, not to back down, but to steady himself. When he opened them again, they were crystal clear. We're not just reforming this location, he said. We're launching a full company-wide review. Every flagged employee, every buried complaint, every fake resolution. No more shadows. He turned toward Jacob, who was still streaming live. You can show this part, he said. People need to see that rot starts at the root, and we're digging it out. Guests nodded. Some looked shocked, others visibly relieved. A woman in her 70s whispered, I've waited years to see someone in charge actually do something. Sophie turned toward her stream and said, We came for a vacation, but we witnessed a revolution. Jungkook scanned the lobby. He no longer saw just a hotel. He saw what hospitality could be, and what it had failed to protect for far too long. This place was never broken because of its decor, he said, his voice quiet but powerful. It was broken because people were trained to smile at some guests and interrogate others. That era ends today. 3 months later, the Horizon Grand Hotel no longer resembled the place where Jungkook John had been mistaken for less than who he was. The marble still gleamed, the chandeliers still sparkled, the velvet chairs still welcomed guests into luxury. But the silence, once filled with judgment, now carried warmth. A portrait of Jungkook now hung beside the front desk, not for vanity but for accountability. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, This space belongs to every guest, no exceptions. Guests now checked in without fear of scrutiny for their skin, accent, or clothing. And behind the desk stood Elena Ruiz, no longer a hesitant staff member, but the newly appointed general manager. Not as a favor, not as a gesture, but because she had redefined what leadership looked like at Horizon. The reforms Jungkook implemented that day didn't just echo through the marble halls of the Horizon Grand in Seattle, they rippled across the entire country. Within 2 weeks, Horizon Hospitality Group announced a sweeping initiative, a full audit of all 57 of its properties nationwide. Dozens of previously dismissed complaints were reopened. Anonymous feedback systems were installed. New mandatory training programs on bias, de-escalation, and accountability were implemented for every single staff member, from concierge to corporate. Each hotel established an independent equity compliance panel, rotating guest advisors, and a zero-tolerance enforcement policy, this time with actual consequences. As for the guests who had witnessed that pivotal moment in Seattle, they didn't just get a PR email. They received handwritten thank you letters and personal calls, not from an intern, not from a manager, but from Jungkook himself. You stood when others looked away, one message read. That matters. Sophie Lin and Jacob Reed, the guests whose live streams had ignited nationwide media attention, were invited to speak at Horizon's Internal Leadership Summit. There, they addressed the power of real-time truth and public courage. We didn't plan to expose anything, Jacob said from the stage. We just refused to put our phones down. But even as the company began transforming, the past refused to stay buried. Just a week after the Seattle incident, Jungkook received a quiet message from a former manager in Portland, someone who had worked under Jeremy Clarkson years earlier. His voice cracked with guilt. Jeremy wasn't acting alone, he confessed. There was a directive, unwritten but real, from Turner's regional office. If a guest didn't fit the brand image, they were marked non-priority. We all knew. We just never said it out loud. Jungkook didn't respond with anger. He thanked the man and handed the message to Carla and legal. Because with that confession, it became painfully clear. This hadn't just been about one bad manager. It had been about a system that quietly endorsed exclusion while smiling for the camera. As the story spread, former employees from across the country began stepping forward. Some had been fired for insubordination when they stood up for mistreated guests. Others were pressured to look the other way. Horizon formed a task force to re-examine those terminations. Some staff were reinstated. Others received long overdue settlements, and no one ever again would be hired or fired without a complete documented trail. It takes more than policy to rebuild trust, Jungkook told his board. It takes proof that silence won't be rewarded, and that telling the truth won't cost you your job. Jungkook's public image changed, too. Once known as the quiet K-pop icon turned discreet billionaire, he was now publicly recognized as a reformer. Not because he chased headlines, but because he finally stepped into them when it mattered most. He launched a new division within Horizon, Horizon Forward, an initiative not built on buzzwords, but on data, progress, and justice. His first act? Elevating Elena Ruiz to National Advisor for Frontline Guest Experience, a title she earned not from loyalty, but from courage. And at the closing of Horizon's inaugural Equity Summit, Jungkook stepped onto the stage in his simple black shirt and said the words that would ripple far beyond the walls of any hotel. Hospitality doesn't begin with the smile you give. It begins with the respect you assume. The audience rose to their feet, not because a CEO had spoken, but because a man once dismissed as not looking the part had walked back through the same door he was pushed out of and held it open for everyone else. If this story moved you, if you believe respect should never depend on how someone looks, speaks, or dresses, then don't just scroll past. Subscribe to our channel for more real stories that expose injustice and spotlight quiet courage. Like this video if you believe accountability matters. Comment below. Have you ever witnessed something like this? What would you have done? This isn't just storytelling, it's truth-telling, and it starts with all of us. We'll see you in the next one.